The first time I heard Black Americans, aka ADOS, aka FBA, Federated Black Americans, use the term Tether to denote other black ethnic minorities in America. Obviously, I thought that this was just simply a classic show of xenophobia, and as we see in history, this type of xenophobia just leads into violence, leads into genocide. And it made me realize that this whole idea of a pan-Africanism or being pro-black is a farce, and it showcases the fact that human beings are innately tribal. And this is a dynamic that is deeper than skin tone, it's more than melanin. And actually, this is something that I often try to explain as a massive contradiction within black people. You see, black people in the West especially want to be treated as equals and are very much against racist and racism, discrimination, and prejudice. But in the same vein, so-called black people are very keen and very able to dispense the same type of prejudice and racist treatments to other people. It's a joke. It's laughable. And when I hear black people speak about ideas such as black people can't be racist because of lacking things such as businesses and institutions, it's laughable. There are various forms of racism, and black people can definitely inflict racial abuse to other people. But I digress. But I've realized something with regards to the whole FBA calling predominantly black Africans and black Caribbean migrants Tethers, is that they have a point. Now, hear me out. Of course, yes, it is xenophobia, it is tribalism, it could probably potentially be seen as racism, sure, but they have a point. You see, what FBA call a tether is basically a person who is arrogant, they show no respect to the community that they willfully want to join, as in migrating to a country and do not want to partake in their cultural norms or look down on that particular community as inferior or as just not decent. And we can see all over the world, nations, people are starting to become quiet nationalistic, and people are putting a microscope to these migrants who show no respect to the cultural norms and the fabric of society in these countries that these migrants wish to join. And I certainly think that these black Africans and these black Caribbeans that come to join Western countries, particularly USA and also the UK, yes, they need to be also scrutinized as well. And this is why I say FBR are right in calling out the so-called Tether as a so-called Tether myself. And I'm speaking from a Nigerian point of view, okay, these are the only Africans that I know inside and out. You see, Nigerians are a great example of people who showcase this arrogance. They, for example, might dismiss the so-called Oyinbo and the lack of culture and this, that, and the other, but yet they willfully come to these so-called Oyinbo countries, right? They come to these countries because their leaders do not have their best interest at heart. They come to these countries because culturally there is something wrong with their culture and country back home. There is something flawed in these societies that they have to leave. And so this arrogance mixed with ignorance creates a very toxic, dismissive, probably very mentally abusive individual. You know, I can't imagine any migrant who, I can just think of myself. Just say I had a plan, a future plan to go and emigrate to Japan. If that was the case, I would be thinking about learning the language, partaking in Japanese culture as best as I possibly could, trying to fit in, trying to learn the writing, basically just accept and adopt the cultural norms because I made a decision and I said, hey, look, I want to join this society. I want to join this culture. I can't imagine being in this position yet dismissing the culture, the host culture that I want to join. That's absolutely insane. And this is why I call it toxic. So, yeah, FBA, Black Americans have a right to call out these people who look down upon the people that they come to join. Now, look, I am of Nigerian descent. I am a Nigerian that was born in Britain. But I've come to realize that these so called Nigerians and many other Africans just have a woeful ignorance and lack of care for their own futures. And this is something that I've been at odds with a long time. It could be members of my own family. Just spending a lifetime looking at the mismanagement and pretty much despicable way in how Nigerians manage life. Nigerians typically show signs that they don't care about these things. They don't care about mental health. They don't care about family unity. They don't care about logical sense. They don't care about the future generations. On both sides of my family, I come from well to do, wealthy families, well known civil engineers, well known architects, chieftaincies, all of that stuff. But this pattern is very common. Okay. Build massive families with many different kids, many of whom do not have an intimate relationship with their parents. And this causes family strife. So in the future, any wills that get passed on, any inheritance is usually squandered, first of all. But then there's also mismanagement because there's distrust in the family. Some people feel like they deserve more, and this is just the breeding ground for the corruption that we see all over Nigeria and in many other places in Africa. A real lack of modernization and thought process when it comes to the thinking about family and the future generations. In my eye, when the corruption like this is prone in families, then you should anticipate and expect that your culture is just going to be a corrupt one, a very corrupt one. Obviously, there's corruption in every nation, but in many cases, Nigeria in particular just takes the biscuit when it comes to corruption. And this is what leads to these mass migrations. sometimes immigration, illegal migration, at any cost. People will uproot and go join another culture, but then they go join a culture with bad faith, bad intentions. Speaking about Japan, there are many scammers in certain areas of Japan doing seedy work, underground work. Away from the scammers, there are people who look down on the people they come to join. Like, this is very bad faith behavior. This is wrong, to look down on the people who you are coming to for some sort of salvation, for opportunities. You see, I see in these Africans that they have no clear plan for the future. Many of them do not care about their future. They don't care about their legacies. It's like many Africans have just rubbed their hands of responsibility for legacy. And so they come to these so-called Oyibo countries with their hands out, looking for benefits, looking for social housing. They get all of these opportunities that their own country couldn't give them, but then they look down on the citizens of the country. They don't want to partake in the society. Many of these boomer migrants will barely have any white friends, barely want to integrate. And yeah, quite rightly, these countries are starting to put a magnifying glass to these people. Like, what benefit are these people doing for these countries? This is how you create ghettos. And of course, some of these host countries, especially with all the old racist legislation, that all plays a part in the ghettoization and making it hard for people to integrate, of course. But still, there should really be a will to want to be fully integrated into your society, you know. And this is why I think in many cases I've been at odds with other third, second generation British Nigerians as well, because there is this crazy idea, this so-called conscious pro-black or Pan-Africanist idea, which is totally anti the so-called white country that they're in. It's quite despicable that grown people, have a choice to move around the world, living in a country where they're paying their taxes that helps the society, to then come out and confirm and say, hey, I'm not American. Hey, I'm not British. It's really shooting yourself in the foot, because at the end of the day, if you struggle to integrate into the wider community, you're just gonna you're gonna suffer. You're gonna stump your opportunity and chances for social mobility. You're just not gonna see as a good fit, a good match. You're gonna keep yourself to yourself. You're not gonna be confident in speaking with the wider society. How many of our parents, when they speak into a white person, they put on this very weird white people voice just to sound more endearing. If you can't integrate, you're not going to be able to communicate effectively with the wider society who have all the opportunities that you want. It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, when it comes to the Tethers, yeah, I agree. I see what the FBA mean. Okay, I see this lack of interest. I see this arrogance and this lack of empathy, total apathy, actually. In fact, I believe it's this same apathy that allowed the transatlantic slavery to be such a long-term thing, for it to go on for so long, and for the Africans to not, for most of them, to not feel a shred of sympathy or a thought of the future. What are we doing here? We are sending our best people out to other countries. It's this same apathy that has allowed that trade to go on. It's the same apathy that has destroyed most of Africa. That brain drain, the lack of future planning, legacy, history, the community ruined in tatters. This is what happens when you operate in this mindlessness. And so, yeah, I agree with the Black Americans to be protective and defensive of people who show no will to connect with the wider society, people who show no care to be included and to take part in the society that they have joined. It makes no sense. This is a completely disloyal person. This is a person who has very low integrity. This is a person who doesn't care for their future. This is a person only thinking of the here and now, what they can get now. It's a very zero-sum mindset. No longevity, no planning. Like, you can't really work with people like that. And this is why, again, Africa is messed up. No planning. People with no integrity running the place, leading to nepotism and all this crazy, crazy corruption. One man stealing billions and billions of people's money. Yeah, that's what happens when you are people who operate in this way, in this very bad mind way. And all it really does for people who might be against what I'm saying, especially Nigerians or Africans, for all it does really is it ruins the next generation. You know, it really does. It ruins the next generation. Many of us first, second generation are in a very confused situation. Many of us, our parents are guilt tripping us to give them money, to you know, take money away from the families that we built and give it to them, prioritize them, when they have shown no design, no strategy, no care with where or how they deliver their kids and how they bring them up, how they integrate them into the society. Absolutely no care. You know, we are the ones that suffer. We grew up very disadvantaged. And I just see a lot of first, second generation Westerners, black Westerners, just confused. And that confusion leads into this so-called black on black violence. And when you call other people coons and coconuts, especially in the area of interracial relationships, people who live in a country surrounded by these types of people, and then you want to blame this black person for entertaining a relationship with these people who are the majority in the society. You want to blame these black people for doing that. Like, this only causes more disunity. Lack of empathy, total apathy, no caring for our positioning, no care for anything. Just running around, running away with these mindless notions of Pan-Africanism and pro-black. But then again, we see, you know, black people are very capable of being, the Africans are the most tribal people on the planet right now. The reason why a lot of black people in the diaspora are suffering and are confused is because the Africans a few centuries ago just didn't develop and didn't create nation states, right? Most African most Africans were tribal, and people take that as a pejorative, but it's the truth. Most Africans were tribal, meaning that you got Africans who had um, who can speak the same language, who pretty much look the same, who pretty much had the same traditions, but because they live over there and we live in this town over here, they saw themselves as separate. They saw themselves as rivals. They never saw themselves as one people. And what happens is, when that happens, yeah, your future is going to be fueled with violence, disunity, and you're going to be weak. That's why all these other countries, unification was a big thing. Japan unifying all these separate warlords, and it was inside the country. That was a thing. England going over to Scotland, Wales to unify and create Great Britain. That's a thing. That's the blood sacrifice that you have to spill for strength in the future. These people were thinking about their future. So I probably went on a tangent, but think about what I'm saying because it's very, very important. The mindlessness, the lack of thought process, the lack of strategy is why many of us black people in the diaspora, many of us black people in the West are in a messed up situation, in a very hopeless situation. And a lot of that is the people who need to be blamed for this, a lot of them are African people. Yeah. A lot of these African peoples that come over to Europe, go over to America, they have kids in these countries, and then they expect you to act and behave just like as if you were born in Africa. How is that possible? How is that possible? It's really insane. It's really low IQ behavior, and it's all linked again to the fact that a lot of these countries that are receiving these migrants, they're starting to look at them closely, look at their behaviors. What are they doing? Are they adding to the society or are they taking away? You see, this scrutiny, you have to put these people's feet to the fire. And unfortunately, I'm not a fan of tribalism. I'm not a fan of disunity. I'm not a fan of mental abuse, verbal abuse. But if you're dealing with a people that show no care or any good intention for your society that you're a part of, these are not your people. You can't work with these people. These people are causing more harm than any good. And so, yeah, you have to scrutinize them and then you have to depart away from them. You have to, as the FBA call it, delineate from them. These are not your people if they are not working with you. These are not your people if they are stereotyping you, looking down on you. Some Americans talk about Nigerians calling them a kata. Honest to God, I've never heard Nigerians here use the term akata, but I know here, when referencing people like Jamaican people, oh, it's Awon Jamo. Those Jamaicans, like in a very negative connotation. Many Africans in the previous generation, they still refer to Chinese people as Chinko. They still refer to Indian people as Paki. Literally. And again, it shows no sign of development. It shows no sign of being aware of the society you're in. Again, you want racial equality, um, but yet you still showcase the same racist behaviors that you want. You expect other people to grow out of. How? And this is a general message to black people in general. Like, if you can't expect people to treat you in a way that you're not able to treat other people in ways, right? Meaning you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't cry about racism and you yourself are being racist and abusing other people, whether it's other people or even your own people. You know, we laugh at the idea of calling people coons. We think it's a joke. It's not a joke. You're mentally abusing people. You know, even terms like whitey, like whitey, these are abusive, racist terms. You know, white boy, white girl. You are demeaning grown people. Imagine if someone referred to you as a black boy, as a grown man, or a black girl, that girl over there. You know, we're living in a time where people are gonna be putting your feet to the fire, and they're gonna see if you're, if you're making any sense, if you're being real, and if you're not, yeah, people are just gonna switch up on you. You know, people are gonna, we see the riots here in the UK a month ago. People are just gonna be a bit, people are gonna scrutinize it, and I'm all for it, to be honest, because I've been saying for a long time that we really need to think about what we're doing. You know, this is what drives the whole Black British conversation. It feels like we're not thinking about what we are doing, and I don't mean as some collective. I just mean as individuals. We're not, our parents didn't think about it. We're not thinking about it. So yeah, I just had to say that. I understand the FBA, and again, I'm not a fan of abuse, harming people mentally, physically, but I understand the need to scrutinize people who are not effective and are not conducive for your group, your community, or your country. And I think these black people that migrate to these countries, they need to be thinking about what they're doing as well, because people are not going to have it. People are not going to just sit there and allow you to just mess things up with your mindlessness, with your lack of thought and your lack of understanding of what you're in. So what do you guys think about it? Let me know in the comments below. I'm gonna do more of these videos ad hoc. No need to cam up, just thoughts. Let me know your thoughts as well. But until the next one.